All right, guys, it's time to admit it. I was wrong about Superman. Welcome back to Comics Are Dope. I'm BJ Kicks, and I haven't titled this video series yet, but basically, this is going to be me just talking to you about things I've learned along the way, or just my musings about a character, a series. I don't know. Just call this why I like this thing or something. I don't know. But today we're talking about Superman, because going all the way back to the first video I ever uploaded on this channel, the channel intro, I basically told you in that video, hey, I'm a big fan of superheroes and I loved Batman, the X-Men, Spider-Man, basically any superhero that had a cartoon in the 90s, except Superman, because yeah. And what's funny is my opinion on Superman is not an unpopular one, or was not an unpopular one. You've heard it plenty of times before. Superman's boring. He's too idealistic. He's way too overpowered. He can do everything. That smile on his face is goofy. I don't know. Right? We've all heard these criticisms of Superman, and I think at some point it became cool to like diss Superman. And it's always been the funny thing, just in my relationship, right? My wife loves Superman. Although she admits that Batman has the better animated movies, she loves Superman. And I've always been a big Batman fan. And so there's the idea that if you're a Superman fan, you got to be a Superman fan and not a Batman fan, and vice versa, which is just total nonsense because Superman and Batman are best friends in the comics. But anyway, the criticisms of Superman are not, like I said, I'm not alone in the critiques that I've had. And after a while, it became cool to kind of, dig on Superman, if you will. Can't remember what, pile on Superman. That's the word. So you hear these criticisms a lot, like, oh, he's too powerful. He's boring. He's a Boy Scout. He's milquetoast. All of these different things. And yeah, I've used all of those arguments at different points. And the cool thing about the internet is, something that can be cool about the comics community on the internet is, in comics community, people don't just tell you that you're wrong. They tell you why you're wrong. So when I would say in my videos, hey, I'm not the biggest Superman fan, I'm buying this because I want to learn more about the character or whatever, people would recommend stories. And so I've been kind of reading like the best that Superman has to offer. And this is why I was wrong about Superman. Or I guess this is really just my new opinion on Superman. So while I agree that there haven't been the greatest Superman stories all the time, I think Superman is a character that can be difficult for people to grasp, like what's great about him. And so people aren't as creative with Superman as they are with, say, someone like Batman or Wolverine, where you've got like a real gimmick that you can use, like the cool edginess, to then go and tell different stories on top of, whether it's a family story, whether it's a story of, hope and loss or redemption. Like all these stories are stories that you see told through these sort of dark hero types like Wolverine, like Batman, even Spider-Man to a certain extent. But with Superman, the expectation seems to be that you're going to get a bright, shining story with a bright, shining hero with no real flaws and therefore no real challenges. And the stories that kind of tread that ground, I understand why they get the criticism that they do, because it, feels like it's been done a lot. But I've read 3 stories specifically that I'm going to talk about today, that kind of changed my mind about Superman. So the first was Superman Birthright. It was the first Superman story I really read and cared about. And it's written by Mark Waid. It's got art by Lionel Francis Yu, who I knew of because he had done art for X-Men with Jonathan Hickman for a while. He was at least doing covers, I know. Pretty sure he started out doing the series too. But anyway, so Superman Birthright is basically a retelling of Superman's origin. For a while, it was the definitive origin in canon. It's been retconned since. But basically, Superman Birthright starts off with Clark in Africa on like some sort of a field trip, or just kind of, traveling to become more well-rounded, basically. And while he's there, he basically kind of has to help with a government coup, helping the people overthrow a corrupt government or a corrupt politician. And while he's there, I mean, again, this is basically him using his powers for the first time for good. And then he just deciding, like, you know what, I need to like do something with this. And so you get him donning his costume for the first time, going on some of his earliest adventures, and of course fighting or coming up against Lex Luthor for seemingly the first time. And it's a great story. It does a lot. This book does a lot to sort of quell objections, right? Mark Waid, says in his foreword that, hey, this was my way of making Superman cool and responding directly to all those things that people criticize him for, like, oh, the glasses are a stupid disguise, and how do people not know? So Mark Waid does a really good job of like just kind of taking those common arguments and dispelling them through the story in a creative and interesting way. I particularly love when Clark is getting his costume, and he's basically like, his mom is the one telling him like, this is how you're going to sell this costume. So she explains the reason for the glasses. She tells him like, yo, you can't wear t-shirts. Like, if you're built like this, like if you wear just a regular t-shirt, everyone's going to know, okay, there's something going on with that dude. So she kind of makes him the frumpy Clark persona. I really love that. But also you get a lot of insight into why Superman, or why Clark is Superman. And he, by the end of the book, there's a clear message that Clark is supposed to represent hope. He's like, look, I want to be seen. I don't want to just wear regular clothes, because then people are going to look at me and think I'm a freak. But if I wear this outfit, people are going to think I'm a symbol and something to aspire to. And I'm like, okay, cool. So Superman's supposed to be like your favorite superhero's favorite superhero. When people look in the sky and see Superman, they shouldn't see something that they fear, like a lot of people think with Batman. They see something that's like, okay, help is here. Everything's going to be okay. Cool. And I'm like, all right, you know what? I get that. I'm cool with that. Another story I ended up reading was Superman Brainiac. And Brainiac ends with a really heartbreaking moment. And I won't spoil what that heartbreaking moment is, but if you've read it, you'll know. It's written by Jeff Johns, if I'm not mistaken, with Gary Frank on artwork. And that was cool. It gave another side of Superman, and just kind of what pains Superman, what makes him tick. And I've been kind of bearing the lead a little bit, but what I am really enjoying about Superman is the family aspect. So, and maybe just because I'm 32 now, or I'll be 32 in a couple weeks. We're a week away from my birthday. That's what's up. Anyway, I'm older. I've got a wife. I've got kids. I've got family. And that's the thing that stands out to me in Superman books, is that he's a family man. He's a proud son. He's a proud wife, or husband, excuse me. He's a proud father. At least in current comics, he is. And so much of what makes Superman is the lengths he goes through to protect the people that are most important to him. And, humanity as a whole is very important to him. But what I love is like, oh, Lois is in trouble. Oh, Jimmy Olsen's in trouble. Oh no, Perry White is in the crossfire in this situation. And you get to see like how Superman is trying to balance being this symbol for the world with also being this member of his family, or his member of his really small, tight-knit community. Love that aspect of it. But so Superman Birthright was the first book that I really read that kind of changed my mind about Superman. And as I'm going back and reading all these classics, I'm reading the current Action Comics run written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, as well as Superman, Son of Kal-El, and all these different things, all the current Superman family of titles. And one thing I love about that is you get this father-son aspect, Superman trying to raise his son, John, knowing that he has superpowers, helping him balance, superhero life and real life, especially in the context of the fact that in that continuity for a long time, both Superman and John Kent's identities were public, and that came with its own set of like issues, but whatever. So that's kind of a highlight of the current Superman books as well, is this whole family aspect. And that leads me right up into Superman for All Seasons. Now, For All Seasons is a 4-issue miniseries. It's written by Jeff Loeb, art by Tim Sale, and it is great. It's basically an early Superman story as well. A lot of the Superman stories that I like are kind of retellings of origins in a way. But basically, Superman for All Seasons, it starts off with Clark at the Kent family farm. Like, his powers have just manifested. He's just starting to like test the limits of his strength. And he's not quite a boy. He's like right there on the verge of manhood. And he's had to make this decision. Okay, what kind of adult does he want to be? Where is he going to go off to school? What's he going to do with his life? And so on. And so he leaves Smallville, moves to Metropolis, becomes Superman, and does all the Superman things, comes up against Lex Luthor. And in this story in particular, when Superman is met with challenges, he often goes back home to Smallville to sort of reset, refocus, regroup, and lick his wounds, and then go back to being Superman. And you get to see a lot of what makes Superman tick. And each episode or each issue is narrated by a different member of the Superman supporting cast. So issue 1, you're getting it from John Kent, Pa Kent's point of view. Issue 2, I believe, is Lois Lane. Issue 3 is Lex Luthor. And then issue 4 is Lana Lang. And Lana says something in that book, and she basically says, like, she's talking about how all these people are surprised or kind of fearful of this Superman. Like, well, if he's got all this power, why doesn't he use it for, like, bad reasons, for lack of a better term? And she basically says, well, in order to understand Superman, you have to understand Clark. And something that I enjoy about that book is that you're seeing not really Superman from this big, bright, like, I'm Superman perspective. The story opens with Clark and it ends with Clark. And all of the perspective that you're getting speaks really more to Clark's nature than just like this persona of Superman that he puts on for the public. And then even the way that Tim Sale draws Superman, he gives him like this kind of farm boy look, and like the big, like, there's not like a super chiseled face and stuff like that. And there's just an innocence that he portrays Superman or Clark with that really resonates even when he's in the big costume. He's supposed to be like this big heroic figure. So I love that. But anyway, what you find in For All Seasons is that Superman is the way he is because Clark was raised by this family in the Midwest, in sort of the middle of nowhere, on a farm. He's from a town where everyone knows everyone. Everyone is important to everyone. And, you just grow up with certain family values. Some might call them American family values. And it kind of just comes down to, like, just being a good person and being, not being a jerk. Right. And that juxtaposed against Lex Luthor, who, for all intents and purposes, is just like a jerk all the time. So I particularly liked that story. It's probably the number one story that I'd recommend to anyone trying to get into Superman. If Birthright was the book that was like, let's make Superman cool, like let's talk to all the detractors that think Superman isn't cool or exciting or intimidating, For All Seasons is a book that's like, if you don't think Superman is cool or great, then you're the problem, not Superman. So it's probably the book that I'd recommend most. And then let's take that into the most recent Superman book, or the book that I've read most recently. And that is Superman's Secret Identity. Now, my man Bunkmaster B says this is his favorite Superman story ever. And a lot of people have it really high on their lists. I don't have it as high on mine because, in my opinion, it's not really a Superman story. So Superman's Secret Identity is about a boy from another Earth who is from Kansas, and his parents named him Clark Kent. And on this world, superheroes don't exist. They read comics just like we do. And so everybody knows who Superman is. And everyone makes fun of Clark for having, Clark's name. And so even his family, they get him Superman gag gifts every year for his birthdays and holidays and stuff like that. And he's just like, he gets a hard time. He gets dealt sort of a bad hand because of his name. And he basically he manifests powers as a teenager, and then suddenly has to kind of decide what he's going to do with them. And so, of course, he eventually leans into them and basically becomes Superman. Like, he wears a Superman costume and everything. And this book follows you throughout his life. So you start off, he's like a teenager, and you end it, and he's like in his 60s. And one, I love that he ages. But so you get this sort of, the book is kind of done from the perspective of, hey, if someone had this great power, what would their identity mean to them? And even though it's not the real Superman, there are so many parallels that it might as well just be the young, real life Clark Kent that we know and love. And I would argue that the book doesn't exist without the young, real life Clark Kent that we all know and love. This is very much a story inspired by Superman. And I think what makes the book great is when you look back on it, this kid has powers. He decides to become a hero. He decides to help people. He's got to decide who he lets in on this secret. He's got to decide how he's going to move, how he's going to protect people and protect himself at the same time. And he's got to try to balance having the quote unquote normal life on top of that, getting married, having kids, being the son, the father, being the family man, like we talked about in some of the other Superman stories. And it's written by Kurt Busiek with art by Stuart Immonen, if I didn't say that already. And Immonen is great, by the way. He does it by just doing pencils. There's no inks. He's kind of uses a dark pencil and then colors it himself. And it's just beautiful. It's beautiful to look at. The double page spreads with Superman just flying around, they are great. Everything's great about this book. And Kurt Busiek writes it. It's Clark writing it in journal entries. And so you spend pretty much 90% of the time in this book, you're inside Clark's head. You're learning what makes him tick, what's important to him, what his values are. And those values are very much traditional Superman values, even though you're viewing it from this very different lens and perspective. It's a great answer to the question, well, what if Superman was real? What if Superman existed in our world? What problems would he face? How would he deal with them? It's a great sort of Superman as a case study. And I think what it does well is it kind of, in ways that the other two don't have to, it explains the impact of Superman, right? Because this guy is from an Earth basically supposed to be our Earth, where comic books are real but superheroes aren't. It feels very much like, what would you do if you got these powers, right? And what he ends up doing is the right thing, because that's what Superman would do, right? Superman would protect his family, he'd protect the people around him at all costs, but he would also protect the greater good from whatever forces of evil, whether it's just natural disasters, whether it's government agents, he would do that. And I don't know, it could be because I'm old, I'm a sap, I'm sentimental, I don't know, but the things that appeal to me about Superman would not have appealed to me as a child, right? I look back, I still haven't gotten through, more than 2 episodes of Superman the animated series, right? Like, there's something that just doesn't quite capture the great things about Superman in current media. I think right now the landscape kind of has to be dark. You kind of have to do something like a Man of Steel to get the eyeballs, but something like a Man of Steel just does not capture what I think is truly great about Superman, because Superman represents the best of us. And you don't get to represent the best of us by playing to like our base level instincts or desires. Superman is about something more. And when you want to feel inspired, when you want to feel motivated, when you want to feel like there's better out there, you read a Superman book. And that's why I was wrong about Superman. And I'm going to continue reading Superman stories and recommending the ones I think are great. I do realize that I've basically been reading the Superman greatest hits list, and every story can't be a hit. And so for every great Superman story, I'm sure there's like several duds, but the benefit of, reading everything way later on is I can just read what everybody already said is good and skip the duds if I want to. But anyway, just wanted to make a quick video about why Superman is great and why I was wrong for not giving him a shot. Hope this was helpful to you. If you're a Superman fan, recommend the best Superman videos or best Superman stories in the comments down below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. I've got a newsletter where you can learn about comics every single week. So subscribe to that, and I'll see you in another video soon. Until then, make sure you're reading something dope. Peace.